Welcome to Dr. Z PhD interviews. This is the place where I interview people who are interesting, inspiring, or both. Today, I have a very special guest. Today's guest is Ashley Adamson, who is writer, speaker, and an incredible motivational content creator. Ashley, thank you so much for being part of the interviews. I'm so excited. We were just talking about it before we started video recording this, about everything that Ashley has been doing, including current books that Ashley has written, which I'm very excited to talk about as well. So welcome to Dr. Z PhD interviews.
Thank you so much, Dr. Z. I appreciate you bringing me on here. Or should I say Natalia? I don't know, for your viewers, maybe I'll just call you Natalia just because I want to get on a first name basis. But thank you for having me today. And I am so flattered that you actually read my book. That's like, wow, I feel such a compliment from that.
I can't wait to talk about it. Can't wait to talk about your book. Can't wait to talk about what you do. But before we start, I'm sure I actually have a lot of viewers who are highly familiar with you. I actually have individual clients I work with who, I had a client who brought you up in your content. And I said, oh, I'm planning to interview actually, and they just fell over, couldn't believe that I was going to interview. So you're clearly, there's clearly huge following, a lot of people that look up to you and look up to your content. For those who are not familiar with you, who have been living under the rock, so to say, share a little bit about what you do, a little bit about yourself, maybe a little bit of your background.
Yeah, totally. So I'm a trans woman, she, her, if it's not obvious already. I am super into personal growth. And so I talk about being trans from a personal growth lens. And that's really the kind of philosophy that I approach being trans as. And I really want to help other people work through this because, you know, it can be really difficult being trans. And I feel like the inner work is sometimes the missing key that people forget about to use to unlock their potential. And I feel like activating your potential is probably the best thing you can do. I have historically been an entrepreneur. I've had a few businesses in the past. I'm currently a product designer. I've worked in tech for the last 6 years. My transition about 3.5 years ago was a huge spiritual awakening and has set me on this path to writing this book, having this meditation series, talked about finding oneself, knowing oneself, and kind of stepping into the unknown and having the courage to kind of become who you're meant to be is a lot of kind of the stuff that I talk about and I really care about. Is that a good enough introduction?
That's a great. We're going to have all of Ashley's information down below. So if people want to go in and look up, which I highly encourage, it's all going to be down below. So there's definitely a lot of content also on YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, your channel, in my opinion, seems to be very raw, and you tend to go into very transparent, very personal subject matters. You also discuss a lot of emotional pitfalls and wins that you tend to go through. Tell me a little bit more about your channel. Tell me how your channel has really helped you in a way, maybe summarize your journey and what the journey has been, because it doesn't sound like you have been, 3.5 years. That's not a long period of time.
No, it's not a very long period of time, but it's just the right amount for me to have this YouTube and to be one step ahead of other people who are transitioning and being able to kind of light the way. I've been waiting for this moment my whole life. I knew 10 years ago that I was going to go in some route like this. I just didn't know how it was going to come together. The transition kind of catalyzed all of that. My YouTube channel is a work in progress. It's something that I initially started because I did want to help people. I just didn't know what kind of content would work and how I would find people. But one day I was bicycling home and said, you know what? I don't have enough time to make highly edited and special videos that are like about this thing. And it takes me a week of editing. I just need to sit down and talk. And I just need to get so good at doing this that the video is good enough. And I did that, and lots of people, it resonated with a lot of people. My realness, the fact that I'm just being very honest and transparent, like you said, was the thing that drew people in and really brought them to the table to share their own experiences. And the most magical thing about this process that I've had is, first of all, it's been like therapy for me. As someone who just recently was able to get a hold of a therapist, this was my therapy, someone to talk to, and also have this kind of feedback from other people and encouragement was huge. But also, the more surprisingly, there's this thing where me and the viewer process together. As I go through whatever I'm talking about, I'll reflect questions back to them as we get to places. And that's really helped a lot of people find their own place within the areas and topics of things that I explore, and also find a commonality and shared ground where we can say, you know what, this isn't just like a problem that I've invented for myself. This is actually a societal and cultural problem that I am experiencing within me because of the way society and culture works. So I think it's been really empowering, and I love that it's resonated with some people. And yeah, it is all over the place, and I'm really just honing it and growing it and figuring it out as I move.
Yeah, I actually like how you just said it is all over the place. Makes me think how that's what makes it really raw, right? It's all of this kind of unedited versions of your inner selves at different stages of transition, perhaps at different stages of your life. And perhaps that's exactly what resonates with people. Sometimes when we have a more edited and more comprehensive channel that somebody has on, it seems a little bit too tailored, a little bit too polished, right? And therefore may not feel as authentic. Yours, I just, like I said, I'm a big fan of the content you put out there. But I also know that you are quite a public figure apart from YouTube. You've spoken on various social platforms. You also given a TED Talk, which is a huge deal to be able to give a TED Talk. I think that takes a lot of courage to be able to get up in front of a big audience. And, you know, it's one thing that you and I are YouTube creators and we talk in private rooms in front of a camera, but to talk in front of people, I know for a fact it takes a lot. And in all of your public appearances, you are clearly very open about being a trans person. And, you know, today I find that a lot of people struggle with really owning their trans individuality. A lot of people really want to identify as, you know, a cis binary, as a woman or a man, or perhaps some other gender expression or gender identity, and not so much owning the trans part of their identity. In what way has being such a public figure and being so open about who you are has helped you own that? Or did you ever struggle with owning that part of your identity?
You know, I think that when I started my transition, it was very obvious that I did not pass. I could not hide the fact that I was trans. So trying to hide the fact that I'm trans seemed counterintuitive to being able to talk about being authentic, being who you are. And the fact that everyone could clock me didn't really help the idea along that I could hide that. So I just said, well, you know, this is the thing that I am most afraid of. And now that I can admit that I am trans, I just need to talk to the world about it. And I should just be how I am and just own that, because there's no hiding that I can do. I think that when I did that TED Talk, I was only a year into my transition. And at that point, I was definitely non-passing. And I didn't have that option to just say I'm a woman and just listen to me. But also being trans and that experience, I don't think that there's any experience that you can have in the world except transitioning. That is the most intense transformational experience. There are many incredible transformational experiences out there, going into the forest and doing all sorts of explorations and soul searching, but changing your gender is not like a one-off experience. It happens every single day for years. And that is the biggest possible transformation that you can do. So I think that, and leveraging that as a story to be able to tell and speak about other things, to speak about what I'm really trying to talk about in that TED Talk is what I call the formless form, which is to look beyond one's shape and to see the essence of what creates it. Mm-hmm. Because when you can find what the commonalities are behind everything, you can really start to understand where things come from, how they take shape, and what role your perception plays in your own experience. I say this all the time, letting go of yourself, because oftentimes you are holding on to some form of identity or ego that's actually preventing you from moving forward because you're afraid of letting it go. And that's a big part of understanding how to navigate your perception. And a lot of this is done in the practice of transitioning. Every day, you're kind of taking clothes and changing what you used to wear, changing your voice, changing your mannerisms, changing how you're referred to, changing your name. All these things are progressive, and they're taking steps and kind of letting that part of you die and making room for that other part of you to grow. Sometimes it's really difficult. It's incredibly hard. Yeah. I just find it like a fertile ground for storytelling and really getting across to other people that don't even know about being trans, some of the power that can be had there and what they can take from that to extend to their own experiences.
So if you weren't such a public figure, do you think you would be so open about your trans identity? What are you, I know it's hard to say because you are a public figure, and obviously speaking about your experience has been at a core of who you are as a storyteller and as a person. But just let's entertain that idea for a second. So you're not
If I was not trying to be a public figure, if I was not going that route of being a speaker about stuff, would I care about making sure to out myself as trans? Probably not, because it wouldn't be an important part of my storytelling anymore, because I wouldn't be trying to tell a story. So what's relevant to me being trans now in this conversation if I'm not trying to tell you a story or to give you some kind of context on where I'm at? I might tell people who are my friends because, hey, I'm going through a hard time. But if I'm going up and doing a TED Talk and my story is not leveraging the trans experience, which at some point it probably will be not leveraging the trans experience, then I won't really talk about it. But I think that as a public figure, it becomes a lever to kind of use in saying, hey, I have this experience and this is a story that's worth listening to. And I just didn't have that before I transitioned. I was a cis male, half Asian. So that there is that, but I was a cis male, and I just didn't feel like I had enough of a unique lived perspective to share anything new or to add anything more into the conversation.
I love what you just said, because in a way, what you said is I'm so much more than just my trans identity, right? That it's part of me, but it's not all of me. And so if I'm not a public figure where that's part of me leveraging as part of my story, there's really no point to contextualize it, or there's no point to bring it up. Just like anything else in the sense of our identities, there's no sense to bring up, for example, that I work as a psychologist unless it's contextually applicable to the story or the conversation that I'm having. And I love that, because I think a lot of times people confuse owning trans identity with you have to advocate, you have to carry this advocacy flag in your arms all the time, so you have to constantly out yourself. And I don't think that's the case. And also think that choosing not to out yourself is also does not equate to hiding. How do you look at that?
How do I look at like the trans identity as something that you need to advocate for as kind of like the baggage that comes with it versus not? So I am not a huge trans advocate, and not because I'm anti-trans or anything, but because I feel way more trans people are way better at advocating for being trans and all of that than I am. I feel like I'm actually not very good at being an advocate for trans people, but because I am trans and I'm so outspoken, I get pulled into so many things that are trans advocacy related. I spoke at Trans Pride in Berlin, and my outfit got me on USA Today as well as Resident Advisor, which is really cool. So now I can say on USA Today and Resident Advisor and all that, but like I wasn't there to actually advocate for trans people. When I did go up there and I spoke, I was talking to trans people. That was the audience that I wanted to speak to, and that is the audience I speak to. So it doesn't make sense for me to advocate for trans people because I'm talking to the crowd of trans people. So I advocate for personal growth and personal development, owning the things that you're afraid of, owning the things that you're attached to, and recognizing that. I find that there are some places within the trans community where being trans is also being a victim, And attaching one's identity to that victimhood creates all sorts of processes and ways of looking at the world, and kind of being anti-cis and anti-other things that I don't find necessarily productive to being trans within this society. And so like, I think that the way that we can progress being trans and progress the human race is we have to understand how to create conversations, create bridges, and really like learn how to grow as people. Trans people are people, and they also need to grow and learn how to become better people, in my opinion, because why would we want to stagnate and just stay still? So my enemy is really just like the thing that I want to advocate for is really like learning to get to that place where you're going to be happier and to grow and to keep moving and to change. And I think a lot of that is honestly rooted in my personal history and a lot of the change that I've gone through, and all of the kind of experiences that I've had, where I've realized, look, you can kind of just have a worse life by being stuck in this and complaining about it and fighting it, or you can go beyond that and grow and start looking at the world as opportunity rather than reasons why you should not try and take an opportunity to make your life better. And I want that for everyone. I really want everyone to have a better life. And so, yeah, that's what I talk about.
Very well said. I like that. I'm such a big proponent for self-growth, especially in the midst of adversity, because I think that's what makes us grow and stretch the most, right? It's that friction, the tension, and transition tends to create that. Looking at your website, it focuses on femininity, focuses on going deeper within yourself to define and to find that inner femininity and what that femininity means. And I find that very interesting because I see a lot of content being produced today that is very, it's very focused external. I don't want to minimalize it to anything, but to me, it's not enough. It focuses very much on outer, on achieving this external congruency, focusing on this outer shell of the body, but not a lot of content is being produced to look on the internal. And your website and everything you create with the meditation courses that you offer, as well as integration classes, self-acceptance classes, it's all tailored to go within. How did that come about? I know you spoke about that the growth is very important to you, but how is that specifically in respect to femininity come about?
Yeah, so thanks for noticing that. That's super important to me. And I guess like the way that I look at it is, how do I add more? How do I make the world better? And what can I provide? And when I look at what's out there and I look at what's available to trans people, it's all the external stuff. It's all like how to do your nails, how to change your voice, how to wear your clothes, how to act more feminine, how to pass. That's a really big one, right? I don't find that to be useful for me to create content for, though I do sometimes create that content. I had to ask myself, what is the most important thing that I care about? And it's really treating people as not just being trans, but just treating people as people, seeing like what the problems are. And for me, when I transitioned, the thing that was missing was a guide on the inner work. I didn't have any resource that said, look, here's all of the inner alchemy, all of the inner transformation stuff that you might want to know about as you go through this process, because it's stepping into the unknown. There's nothing out there that I've seen that talks about the internal process in a way that's a guide to help you figuring it out. And it's such a confusing place to be in. There's a lot of paths that lead to nowhere or lead to potentially negative places. And so I wanted to just equip people that are going through this process to be able to know what's coming up, what to work through, and how to work through it, and what things are really important to get into place now. So when things kind of bottom out at certain parts in your journey, you have support in place, or you know how to work through it, or just even know that this is a part of the process and isn't really unique to your situation. This is just a part of the process. So many people, I've been doing this long enough that I've been able to see people at the start of their transition messaging me and talking about, how bad it is and how much suffering they're going through and how dark things seem. And then like 6 months to a year later, they're so much better and they're like flying and they're thriving and life is so much greater for them that, it's a typical experience. It really is. It gets really bad and then it gets much better. And I even have this little map, this little, what is it? Journey, trans journey. What did you think of that, Natalia? By the way,
I think that's in a book. So getting to we were talking about how I'm not going to capture this with my virtual background, but this is a book Ashley wrote. And you can see, I was telling Ashley that I am, while a voracious reader, I'm not a voracious marker. I mark rarely. I'll tell you why I mark rarely, because I think a lot of content that's written, in my opinion, can be fall into garbage category. So I'm very opinionated about books I read. But when I mark, it means a person has touched on something that I think is very fundamental, and you clearly done a great job of it. Let's talk a little bit about this book, because it does have a diagram you just brought up, which I thought was a great way to showcase how the journey is not a straight line, how it's not the straight linear progression. Before we start talking about this book, let's talk about the title, because this is a brilliant title. So the title of the book, and for those who are interested, I recommend purchasing this book. It's a great read. It's incredibly accessible and has nuggets of gold. It's called Trans Kung Fu: Awakening Self-Acceptance. Now, first, when I read Trans Kung Fu, I thought, oh my God, this girl is up for a fight. But right in the beginning, you describe Kung Fu. And I thought, this is just contextually makes one to look at their transition journey completely different. Can you, without me reading what you wrote, I have it actually highlighted here.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Kung Fu and why Trans Kung Fu.
Yeah. So, taking a step back from the title, I'll have my own personal anecdote and then I'll go into the title. So I am a very spiritual person. I have been, but my transition became a huge spiritual awakening. And when it happened, it was like a rebirth. I experienced suddenly like the other part of myself that existed that I had completely shunned and kept away. And when that part of me re-entered my body, I actually received information from her about my path, my destiny, where I've been, and started to recollect past lives and experiences that I've had in different shapes and forms. And a big part of my spirit's journey is actually Kung Fu, the art and practice of honing oneself through movement and through discipline and action. And so that became a big part of my own personal experience in growing, becoming stronger, and becoming a lot more powerful in the practices and the ways that I live my life. So when I thought about the title for this book, I originally just called this Awakening Self-Acceptance. And that's a very generic title. So after kind of reflecting a little bit more about really what I'm trying to say here is I was trying to bring my methodology and the way that I live life for other people. And so I said, you know what, I have to own this. I have to make this clear for other people. I am teaching people Kung Fu in the way that I understand it. And Kung Fu is really like determined and practiced implementation of one's skills and abilities in a way that is consistent and showing up and understanding this is hard work. It needs to be done and it's a process and you need to move through that. But the most magical thing about that is it creates mastery. It creates the ability to do things in ways that are fantastic. You've seen those Kung Fu movies, you've heard of those Kung Fu legends of people being able to do tremendous things that seem almost like beyond human. And I really believe that we can do a lot of amazing and fantastic things when we really apply ourselves and be able to leverage that exponential growth and that compounding interest on the work that we do for ourselves. So that's really the framing for the book. And there's a lot of very deep topics in there that I actually move over very quickly. But what I really try to get people to do is to do the practices, to ask the questions, to do the meditations, because that is the root of the work. That's the stuff that really gives you the experience that unlocks transformation. You can know things like, oh, it's good to accept myself and it's good to know this and to be loving and caring. But how do you practice? How do you show up? And how do you keep doing that? That's the stuff that changes your subconscious. That's the way that it changes your worldview and the way that you see things. And that's the stuff that builds your personal power. So that's really why I call it trans kung fu, is because I want people to really think about how they're going to become a more powerful and awakened warrior of like who they are and the hero in their own journey. Why not be the hero?
I love it. I'm feeling the kung fu. You just put it in one sentence here, reading out of your book, kung fu, made of two characters, kung meaning effort or endeavor, and fu meaning time spent. This is what transition is about. It is, this effort and endeavor and what you're going through and time spent on it that really makes you a master of yourself, a master of who you are. I'm stealing it. So if you're going to see me repeating it, I'm right now giving you credit.
Thank you.
For sure. I agree. I think you go into very deep things in the book, and I agree. They're kind of very deep and sometimes could be a little bit too much to grasp for people if you know what to look for. And I especially loved, I'm looking here at this page where I highlighted, where you talk about denial and where you explain how to get in touch with the denial and how for you the shell of denial cracked, or at least one element of denial cracked 6 months of being on hormones, and how you emphasize how it took you a while. It didn't just happen overnight, but I like especially how you discuss denial, because you really do an amazing job summarizing that it's not something that you can easily get in touch with. If you're going to try to get in touch with the feelings related to denial, it's not going to be that accessible to you. You're almost writing in a very psychological, very therapeutic, very mindfulness type of mindset. And this is why I love this book. I want to read something from the book that I think will, apart from giving viewers a little bit of an idea, I want to read this because I think this is very important for people to hear. I think what you wrote here is very important for people to understand, because earlier you talked about victim mindset. This is something that can help you to get out. So you said that this is a part where you describe different types of self, inner self and outer self, or inner world and outer world, and the self being in between. And Ashley does a great job in the book with a diagram to demonstrate what she means by that. But here's what you wrote. You wrote, if you identify with your outer world, then you identify with your body, how you look and what you accomplished. So that's the outer world, right? The external. But if you identify into your inner world, you begin to identify with the thoughts, feelings, and experiences you have, but you're not your thoughts. And this is where you first talk about where the gender dysphoria comes from. And this is a brilliant paragraph. Oh. Can I give it away, or should we get people to get the book?
No, please give it away.
This is my favorite part of the book, where you say gender dysphoria is an example of how all of these worlds meet. You see your body, the external world, does not match what you know about yourself, the self, and you, as the internal world, experience negative thoughts. If you identify with the thoughts, then you experience suffering.
Yes, yes.
Can you talk more, after I read this brilliance, can you talk more about this? How did you, it's not easy, in my opinion, for somebody who does not have psychological background, I assume you don't have a degree in psychology, no. To derive at this understanding of outer, inner, a construction of the self in between, which is, you're absolutely accurate about that. So how did you derive at that? Let's talk about that, tell me.
Yeah, so I guess, like, well, first of all, I'm so glad that you said that, because this has basically just been built up of my own experience and observation. And I am a big mindfulness practitioner. I spend a lot of time meditating. I've done meditation and energy work for 10 plus, maybe 15 years. So when I was already ready for this transition in a lot of ways, to be equipped to observe and see how my whole mental processing went through this. So this inner outer world and how all of this occurred was just based on my own observations of the experience and what I saw happening. Because one aspect of myself experiences it and sees it and goes, okay, I'm experiencing this gender dysphoria and this is hurting. But also another part of me can record keep and see what the points were along that thought stream. And I wanted to record keep that thought stream so then I could deconstruct it and then give it to people so they could understand what those steps are. And as a designer, as someone that designs for humans, a lot of this is understanding what the steps are in someone's thinking or someone's process and flow. So it was very native for me to be able to tie this mindfulness experience where I'm able to observe the mind and not buy into it and just see how it's processing and experiencing things. And also this designer mind of being able to take frameworks of understanding how to break down processes and explain it in a way where other people can see it. And so that's kind of how I arrived at understanding really the self. And the self it's a very complex thing when you try to explain it thoroughly. And I could dedicate a whole book to that or multiple books. I mean, people, they spend an entire lifetime really understanding the self. The more you spend on the self, the deeper it goes. But I really wanted to kind of say this is most useful for you in the guide, which is to understand that yourself is not the outer world and yourself is not the inner world. It's your relationship to both of these things and how you pick and choose these pieces to construct your identity and what you are attached to. But that is ultimately not the self. You are so much more than the parts that make you up. And your self is not static, it's fluid. It continues to shapeshift and change. The more that you pay attention to the self, the more you can realize how infinite it potentially is. This is coming back to the concept of the formless form. You take a form, and that is the self that you identify with and that you are attached to. But there's also a formless version of you that allows you to change and shapeshift and become something else. And when I was transitioning, I was playing a lot with this idea of the formless form because I was stuck in the form of thinking that I was a cis male and I was evolving to being a female. And to do that, I also had to observe my attachments, the things that I had projected onto myself and seen myself as, to let go of that and to be able to flow through that process to this other feminine self. So I'd put on a dress and then I'd go out there and, oh my God, I feel so feminine and I feel as a woman right now. But then I might go home and then I'll wake up the next day and go to my job or do something where I go, oh, suddenly I feel more like a man. So what happened there? What's going on? And the transition is sort of like this continual flowing of this old self and letting it go and creating this new self. So it's like your self has always been there. It's always there through this whole process. And you're really just trying to kind of, I say this and it sounds very simple, but you really just have to find what feels right and to rest there. And it sounds really simple, and it really is. There's a part of you that just knows things. And when that part of you says this, you have to listen to that, because that's your best guide on really uncovering who you are, who you're meant to be, and where you're meant to go and what you're meant to do. And the list goes on and on and on. But like the more you know yourself, the better you're able to make decisions and make discoveries and do some things. I hope I'm not over answering this answer, and I hope that I have answered this question.
You have. You over answered it as well, but in you over answering, you gave a lot of very important information out and a lot of very important nuggets. I definitely, like I said, I'm, anybody who watches my channel knows I rarely plug a book. I think through my time, I only plugged 2 books so far. When I plug a book, I really like the book. So I really highly recommend. We'll put all the links below.
Oh my God, thank you so much, Natalia. Oh,
well, listen, like it's credit well earned, credit well deserved. You wrote the book. It's a great book. I'm really not sugarcoating it. But moving past your amazing endeavors, let's zoom a little bit on your personal life. I know that you're currently in Berlin and you've been living in Berlin for some time now. In fact, you transitioned in Berlin.
Yeah, so I did about half of my transition in the United States and half of my transition is in Berlin. I think actually the majority of my transition has now been in Berlin because I did, I think, a year and a half in the United States and then I've done 2 years here. So yeah.
So in your years that you spent in Berlin, in foreign country, different culture, different environment, have you noticed at all from your observation that the construct and understanding of gender is in any way at all different from US?
I find that the best litmus test is dating cis men who are hetero because they have the most imposed structures and definitions of like what gender is and what's acceptable and what's not. And I found Berlin to be a very ripe place for dating. There's a lot of acceptance and I don't really run into a lot of issues as a trans woman here. I feel like the flexibility in showing up as whoever you want to be is much more open. And I think that's also particular to Berlin. Berlin is really well known for being a bit out there, being a lot more accepting and a lot more kind of pushing things to its limits. You go out to a club and it's not unheard of to see people having sex in the club. It's a very normal behavior to see. Which when I was the first time, I walked into a room and I saw like 8 people all getting blowjobs and stuff. I was like, okay, that's it.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
all right. I'm in Berlin. But yeah, I feel like there's just like a lot less structures that need to be enforced or reinforced in gender here.
So for anybody who is interested in exploring their sexuality and interested in exploring, especially their sexuality in relation to their gender at any part of their transition, pre or post or anywhere in between, it sounds like Berlin would be an ideal place because it sounds like people in Berlin are very far from cis heteronormative sexual stereotypes.
Yeah, I'd say yes. However, I think Berlin 10 years ago was even more open. And I think Berlin has become a more popular city. It's become more mainstream. A lot of people who are living more regular lives are moving here. And so I feel like it's still there, but it's definitely, if you have an impression of it 10 years ago, it's not the same city. And so there are places where I feel like, I don't want to be here in this area, or maybe there's a lot of men that make me feel uncomfortable. So like, I would say yes, but there's a caveat to it, which is it's not just like free reign, just run around everywhere, however you want to be, and not expect to maybe encounter someone who will say something. But I wouldn't say it's a very dangerous city. It's very safe. And it's a great time. I've had a fabulous time here. It's a lovely city. I give it high grades. If there was like a trans friendliness score, I'd say it's definitely up there in one of the top cities in the world for sure.
So I have a question for you. It wasn't on a list of the questions I sent you. So
yeah,
answer, just tell me to bug off.
No.
Speaking about sexuality, and it sounds, and I've seen some of your videos on YouTube where you also spoke about that, how Berlin has been in many ways great to explore your sexuality with a lot of, I think you quote, you said something to the extent with a lot of really hot guys.
Yeah, there's lots of hot guys.
Hey, no shame in that. But in what way has that exploration of your sexuality, do you think that helped you? In what way has it helped you at all, if any, in your relationship to your body, especially perhaps to body parts that you don't, and I don't know anything about you, I don't know what, but if there's anything about your body, any parts of your body that you don't feel comfortable about, has that sexuality served you well in terms of achieving that confidence?
Okay, so Berlin has been instrumental in helping me accept myself on deeper levels that I did not know I could reach without the sexual experience. I think that we say being your gender and sex in terms of, like your genitalia are very separate topics, but the act of sex and being and your gender are very intertwined.
Yes.
And so like the previous cities that I've lived in, I did live in Portland for 9 months. I lived in San Francisco. I lived in LA, and all of those areas I did try dating as trans. I also did try dating as trans in a couple other places, but in Berlin, there's so much sexual experimentation and freedom and the quality of people here in terms of dating and them being attractive, them being confident, them knowing themselves a bit more. I find that there's a higher concentration here than in any other place that I've been to. Dating in Portland was rough. It was very hard. I maybe met 2 qualified guys that I'd say, I would date you, or I'd like to have a sexual experience. Berlin, it's like they're just everywhere. And so that has made it a lot easier, more accessible for me to reach out and to find new experiences. Now, I have been looking for a boyfriend, so it's not like I'm just trying to throw myself around, but going through this process and getting to understand people is a part of the process. Like I have to understand myself, and the best way of learning that in terms of what kind of person that I want to date is by going on dates and experimenting and seeing what happens. And through this process, it's really felt like a continual refining and shaving off of the layers of repression, shame, guilt, and sadness of my situation, how I've been conditioned to think of my body, how I've been conditioned to think of who I am. Am I, the stories of, am I disgusting, or I am disgusting, or this is disgusting, or people won't accept me, or they'll see me as a boy girl or a boy or what have you. This kind of experience of being able to share sexual experiences has really opened up not just my body, but it feels like my soul, like parts of me have just emerged. And even recently, I've finally met someone that I am able to consistently date, and I would call as close to as my first boyfriend. I'm now seeing. Unfortunately, I'm moving, so that I'm going to have to say goodbye to him. But he has treated me and seen me so fully as a woman. I've never experienced it like that. I've dated a lot of men, and I think a lot of those men were a bit older. They were between the ages of 28 to, I've dated people up to 65. And I feel like you've talked about this a lot with gender schematics, and how I think that the introduction of trans and being a trans woman versus a trans man, that has come more recently. And so the gender schematics and perception of what is appropriate of what gender is kind of formed a little bit at an earlier age, it seems. So these people that I'm dating, they've kind of encountered the idea of trans and recalibrated and worked through it in some regard. But I think at the deepest level, there's still a part of my experience that I've had previously with men where I feel like I'm a little different than a cis woman. I feel like I'm a trans woman or some shape or form of a trans woman. And so I do feel a little bit of guilt and shame in my body. But this person I'm dating is 24. So he has had, he's been exposed to this at a much earlier age. And I think that's reconfigured his gender schematic of how he sees women and how he defines women in his on his most deepest level. And so the way he treats me and sees me, it's absolutely a different feeling. It's absolutely like when he's over me and I'm there underneath him, I feel like I can just open up and I can open my heart. I can open like a flower and just be completely vulnerable and exposed in all of my fear and all of the pain that I've gone through, and to just say like, here I am, this is me, I'm fully exposed, here's my heart.
I love that.
Yeah, and
That's
that
so beautiful.
Transformative, absolutely.
So you're drawing a parallel between transitioning at a younger age in today's world, and dating people who are close to your age, who, like you said, they don't have this gender mentalizing concept that are so incredibly cis-binary, that helps them and helps you broaden up your internal world of what gender is. I think that's very. How old are you, may I ask? I don't.
I'm 36.
Oh my God! I'm like, Ashley must be in her 20s. Oh, okay.
You're like, oh, other people your own age. I'm like, okay, girl, yes, thank you.
Oh, you look younger than you age for sure. Certainly, I pinpointed for you for somebody in her 20s. So definitely look.
I get that all the time. It's partially being Asian. It's partially having FFS. And yeah, it's my skin being Asian. It kind of looks good. And then FFS helps remove some wrinkles and stuff like that. So I'm like, thank you. I get to experience my life being a younger woman than just feeling like I'm getting older. And I mean, I literally finished my transition. I haven't finished my transition, but I really feel like I came into my blooming at 34 or 35. And as a woman, there are only certain things that you can experience at certain ages when you're younger. And I really wanted to have that experience. And so I'm really thankful that I can have that experience. But yes, having someone who is younger and has been kind of through that processing has really helped me experience myself. There's one thing I want to add on there, which I think is a nuance and kind of steps into the spiritual territory, but it's also really about mindfulness and being aware of yourself, which is that the heart is the best place to center one's attention and understanding where you're at or where someone else sees you. The thing is it's really hard to see how another person is seeing you if your heart or your mind is clogged up with lots of thoughts and a lot of other things, because there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of signals when you're full. So how can you understand what's really going on? But if you're able to, and I have this in the book, be able to clear yourself and to be able to empty your mind and to empty your thoughts and experience and to really just become a vessel, you can really pick up a lot from what someone else is seeing in you when you become blank and you become empty, because it's sort of like a bedroom. If you clear out all the furniture of a bedroom, suddenly when someone puts a pin inside the room, you're going to notice that pin. But if there's a lot of furniture in there, you're not going to notice it at all. And when I clear myself and I open myself up, and this is really the Kung Fu aspect of me, I can feel one's projection and the way that they see me. And the way that they see me helps me actually change form. Because I can grasp their projection onto me and use that as a mirror that's outside my own judgment and self-perception to help me get out of the things that I am actually clinging to. Like, I'm not beautiful, I'm seen as a man, I see myself as a man, I'm not attractive, those kinds of things. When someone sees me as attractive, as beautiful, and as a woman, I can say, hey, that's actually data that can contradict the negative self-talk and the negative voice that holds me back. And that's the kind of stuff that really unlocks powerful personal transformation, which is why I find sex to be such a powerful and amazing space to do that, because it's the most energetically intense, where all of this stuff interplays.
Oh my God.
You're right. I should be a sex therapist.
You know what? I always say that sex is very important. It's sexuality who you're attracted to in your relationship to gender. They're not that far off. And when younger people seek my help, I always recommend exploring yourself a little bit more in context of that sexuality and your body being so vulnerable in proximity to another human being to really understand deeper senses of your gender. So everything that you said, yes. And, you know, I can talk to you all day. I love talking. I still have so many questions I would love to ask you. Sadly, my viewers are constantly nagging me for keeping my interviews of the past shorter than an hour. You know, they're all, Dr. Z, these are so long. Why do they have to be so long? Well, they have to be so long because we're talking to incredible people that have a lot of incredible things to say. Really love having you on here. Thank you so much again. As I said,
I take a screenshot of you holding that.
Yes.
Oh my God, I'm just so proud that you're holding that.
I can even send you a separate, even better screenshot today of me
Yes,
holding it
I would
where it's
love that.
visible. Like I said, I think this is important. I very much look forward to you writing a second part to this book. I very much looking forward to your work because it's very important for me as a psychologist, and having an understanding that an integration of the inner self is far more outweighs the integration of the external self. External is important, but if you have struggling still with shame and guilt and love and self-acceptance, and you're still not feeling that inner congruency, that inner peace, what is the point, right? Then you're just a person that fits in, but you're still tormented on the inside. So I think what you're doing is very, very important, incredibly valuable. I'm so excited to have you on here. Thank you so very much. Such a pleasure. And I look forward to your future work, whatever it is that you do.
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you so much. The praise has just been, I've never heard so much praise for my book before, and it just makes me feel so right. It makes me feel like I'm valid in the efforts that I'm doing. I am not a psychologist like you are. And so it's just kind of like throwing it out there and seeing what fits and what resonates. And I'm just a personal fan of you and the work that you do too. So for me, this is also like a fangirl experience of us being able to interact. I'm just so happy about that. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you.